Hi everybody, I'm excited to be here today to help you know how you can empower sellers with APIs. In my presentation today, I'm going to be touching upon four main topics. One, the importance of aspects on listings and how you go about improving how well sellers can adopt those to their listings. Two, boosting sales of your listings using a feature that we offer called Offers to Buyers. Third, tell you a bit about a brand new feed API we've launched for sellers. And lastly, share with you some important changes and improvements we've made to our APIs based upon your feedback. So let's jump right in. Earlier today, you heard Michael tell you about how important it is to adopt aspects. I'm going to stress that exact same thing with you here and also show you how to do it. So when working with listings, there's opportunities to improve how well aspects are adopted at each stage of the life cycle. This can be done when creating listings for the very first time in the listing flows or listing tools you offer to sellers, helping them find opportunity within their existing listings that are missing required or recommended aspects. And lastly, when revising listings, to again hit them up to get them to add those aspects to their listings. Now, when creating listings, the most important thing to do is to show sellers the aspects that are relevant to their listings for the category that they're listing in, and help them understand which ones are most important. Now, if you've been doing this for a while, you'll recognize those two APIs at the bottom, Get Category Specifics and Taxonomy APIs, are the same ones you may have been using to do that metadata little fetch. We've added some new capabilities and features to those that'll help make it even easier for you and for sellers to know which ones are most important. I'll share more on that in a few minutes. Next up, for existing listings, you really need a good way to find out which ones have the most opportunity, aka the most missing required aspects and the most missing recommended aspects. This is something that you can do on a regular cadence, daily, monthly, or even on demand. And you can do this with changes we've added to the Compliance API. Lastly, when revising listings, it's very much like creating listings where you can use that same metadata fetch from Get Category Specifics or Taxonomy API to help sellers know which ones are most important. Now, as I just shared, we've added some new features to these existing APIs to help you and sellers be able to increase their aspect coverage on their listings. First of all, we've known for a long time it's very important to be able to do a single fetch, to get the entire category tree for a site, as well as all the aspects for all the categories. That can be a big piece of data, but sometimes it's worth doing just once. The Trading API and Get Category Specifics, this has been available for a long time. And though there's many nice things about the Taxonomy API we introduced a couple of years ago, it was missing that bulk fetch. Well, I'm happy to share with you today that's now available, so you can do a single fetch there as well to get all aspect metadata in one shot. Next up, as you've heard Michael talk about, and perhaps seen in other places too, we now separate aspects into three main buckets or categories of importance. One is required. Those are ones that you must give us in order for a listing to be able to be created or revised. Next up is recommended. These are ones that we know that buyers use a lot when they come to sites when they're trying to find listings to purchase. And if you don't have those recommended aspects on your listings, you're not going to show up much of the time and sellers' listings won't sell. That recommended bucket has really in the past been based upon editorial input to that, and humans making decisions around that at eBay. We're actually using real-time buyer demand data now to update those buckets using that buyer demand data, so we know for a fact that it is the most relevant information that buyers are using. We've never been able to tell you which aspects are truly as well recommended as we are now. That last bucket is optional aspects. They're important, they can become more important over time, and there's no such thing as too many aspects. So if you can encourage sellers to do so, it's great to have them fill in the optional ones as well. It can only help. Next up is the relevance indicator. This gets back into what I just mentioned around buyer demand data. So internally, we use that buyer demand data and that relevance score as a means to help determine whether an aspect belongs in the optional category or the optional bucket or the recommended bucket. In addition to each of those, within each of those buckets, there may be anywhere from 1 to 10 or even a few more aspects. And even within a bucket, it's important to know which ones are more important than others. And here too, just like we use the buyer demand data to help decide which aspects belong in what buckets, we do this ordering of the aspects with that. Now, ordering and bucketing and just putting them in the most important order for sellers to experience in the visual areas you create for sellers is super important. But just like Michael showed you earlier, and you'll see in a few minutes, we've added that gamification and also told sellers sometimes even the number of incremental searches they might get by adopting an aspect. That's why we have made a decision to also expose the buyer demand data. Now, this is, again, really important data about our marketplace, and we need to make sure applications are going to utilize this in the way that we've prescribed. So there's a special approval process to get access to that relevant score to show it explicitly. And you can reach out to eBay's API development support team to get into that process and making that request to do so. Last up is soon to be required. As you've heard or experienced or seen, over time, some aspects become more important than even recommended. They move into a bucket where it's required. It's because it's important because what buyers are looking for. It's also important with the feeds we send out to external traffic drivers. We have to have those aspects. And in the past, when something graduated from recommended to required, it sometimes kind of caught you by surprise. We've always communicated those things in email form or on updates on our site information pages, but there's never really been a programmatic way for you to be able to determine when that's going to happen. So now we are exposing what we call the soon-to-be required date for those aspects that have become required after a warning period. As you can see, we've added almost all of these features to the existing Get Category Specifics API and the Taxonomy API. The reason we haven't added soon-to-be required to the Taxonomy API is it's because the Taxonomy API is really our go-forward story. Because there are so many developers that rely on applications using Get Category Specifics, and just because how important aspect adoption is, we made sure we put the two most important pieces of this new functionality in both Get Category Specifics and the Taxonomy API. But going forward, it's really in your best interest to begin using the Taxonomy API. You don't need to do it immediately, but as soon as you can afford yourself the opportunity, it's worth the investment because that's where all new features are going forward. They won't be in Get Category Specifics. They will be in Taxonomy API exclusively. Now, I'd like to take you through a little bit of the request and response formats to see just where this new information and new capability shows up in these APIs. So as I mentioned, we've started bucketing things into required, recommended, and optional. And that bucketing is done behind the scenes using that real-time buyer demand data on our side to determine that bucketing and the sorting of aspects within those buckets. So there in the Get Category Specifics call in the Trading API, that bucketing shows up under the usage constraint either as recommended, required, or optional. Whereas the relevance indicator, which is that search count, really shows up in what we call a relevance indicator or a search count. That too, as I mentioned before, requires permission for your application. So if you're interested in that, again, reach out to eBay API developer team to learn how to get that for your application. But the nice thing about that score, whether it's used implicitly behind the scenes for the bucketing and ordering or showing here, it's really representation of buyer demand. This really means how often somebody searches for something on eBay and uses a brand name, for example, or how often they click on the left navigation once they've done a search to refine the results. And then also from our browse nodes, where we get inbound SEO traffic from external sites like Google. When we land there, we know sometimes that size or brand or whatever, what have you, is an aspect that the buyer was looking for, and that'll accumulate towards that buyer demand score. This is the best signal we've got to let to know which aspects are most important. And as shown here in the lower right, this is the way we've chosen to visualize that for our sellers, and it's worked rather well. I'll show you just how well in a little bit. Now, I won't spend a lot of time here, but as you can see, those same features are in the Taxonomy API for Get Item Aspects for Category. That smart bucketing is there, the relevance indicator is there. In addition to that, though, as I mentioned, is this soon-to-be required date, or here, expected to be required by date. This is a way for either you to present in your user experience to sellers which aspects will move from from recommended to required and when. This is represented in UTC sign, but you're able to translate that, of course. And this is important not just for what I'd say is your user experience-based views. A lot of you have systems that process aspect improvements offline too, so you can use this programmatically to trigger data managers within your organizations to help them know when to make those mappings for those aspects that will become required soon. Next up is how to find existing listings. So anytime we introduce a new required aspect or new recommended one, it's very likely that sellers will pick those up as they're creating those listings, or either they're revising existing ones, but they don't often take the time to go back and analyze all the existing ones that are out there. So we wanted to find a very easy way to help sellers and you with that. In Seller Hub, we've created this experience that Michael shared with you earlier that shows you which aspects are missing from a listing, either required or recommended. In the API form, we do this through utilizing a new compliance type known as aspect adoption. Here's a response format for that, where you can see aspects adoption, the new compliance type is included there. The compliance state is shown as out of compliance, which means you're missing a required aspect. At risk means that you're at risk of becoming out of compliance because there is a recommended aspect there, which we view as very important still. And then lastly, what's not shown here, and I'll show you in a moment in the demo that I'll do, we also have support for soon to be required aspects, meaning recommended ones that will soon be required. So before I take you to the demos, there's one last thing I want to mention. And this slide may look familiar because Michael shared something with you very much like this earlier today. Over time, as we roll out aspect-related improvements and updates, it can really be a function of new ones we add, existing ones that we change, or even removal of some in some cases. But as we're making more and more improvements to our aspect data, we find that sometimes the aspect itself is right, but the naming may be a little different than how buyers are looking for it, or kind of how industry represents it. So we might change something from type to byte type, or from supported printing sizes to supported paper sizes. These are logical improvements. Where in the past, though, anytime that we made a change like that, and you hadn't yet fetched the latest metadata and sent it in, we would either reject the request if it's a required aspect, or it would get doubled up on a listing where it wasn't important, or where it wasn't necessary. So what we've done now is inside of our listing APIs and our listing platform is we will help you with those renames when it's a one-to-one, also known as a like-for-like aspect change. We do this as good till cancels are renewed, which happens monthly. So anytime an existing good till cancel listing gets renewed, we'll compare it against the latest metadata. And if there's a like-for-like aspect replacement, we'll do that rename for you so buyers get that benefit. But we'll also do it as items get created or relisted using the inventory API, the trading API, whatever means you use to create listings, also in MIP or other feeds too. So while we're excited about this and we know it helps, we're very cautious about it too, because if we determine there's not an exact match for or a like-for-like replacement, we won't do this, and you'll get those listings that show up basically then the compliance API for ones that might be missing recommended or required aspects, and you'll need to address those there. Now, I want to stress here that while this is a convenience feature, it's helpful, it really makes things better, it's still best for you always to make sure you've got the latest copy of that metadata so you don't have to rely on this feature, but it is there as a failsafe. So now I'm going to do my best to take you through some live demos. And live demos are always live demos, so anything can happen, but I'd like to take you through get category specifics, the improvements we've made there, get aspects for category in the Taxonomy API, as well as the compliance API. The very first thing I'd like to show you is the improvements we've made to the get category specifics API in the trading API family. So I'm going to run this request here. This is actually running in staging because it's going to release in early August. Performance in production is a little bit better, but once the result pops up here, I can show you that what we've done is gone ahead and added in the relevance indicator. So this is that buyer demand count that's used behind the scenes to separate things into required, recommended, and optional, but also do the ranking of how important aspects are in each one of those buckets. So it's used behind the scenes for the sorting and then explicitly shown to applications that have approval to show this data. Next, I will switch over to the Taxonomy API, the REST-based equivalent, and let's get a fresh copy of this. And I will pull up the aspects for this particular category here. And within that, you'll be able to see the same things I mentioned around the smart bucketing and ordering. In addition to that, we'll see the relevance indicator, the scoring there. But also, if we scroll down here to the very bottom, You can also see the expected required by date, so that's available there too. Next up, let's go to the Compliance API. This is the one that we can use to find all the listings a seller has that is missing a recommended or required aspect. So sending this request off, I've sent the request in for a seller that's defined by the token I've used, and I've specified the compliance type as aspects adoption. In looking at this response, I've got a listing ID that came back that tells me that I'm missing some required aspects. And it gives me the aspect names that I'm missing, and it will localize those for me as well. Next up, it'll tell me which aspects that are recommended that are also not in this listing. It will give me the names for that too. Lastly, I'm also excited to share that this will display the same breakdown here for aspects that are soon to be required. So these are recommended ones that will be required soon in the future. So with this set here, you'll be able to pull the most relevant metadata for sellers in the listing flows, or as you're creating and revising listings, to know which aspects are most important by way of which bucket they've been put in, the importance within that bucket, whether they're going to be required soon, and additionally, if your application is approved to do so, you can also show the seller how many incremental searches they'll get. With that, let me head back over to the deck and I can take you through a little bit more information. Now, as you've heard me say and others say, and you've likely experienced yourself, over time, eBay does continue to make updates to its category tree as well as its aspects within that category. And in the past, it's always taken an effort to go through and compare the new category tree and aspect tree to the old one to understand just where the differences are. And we know something, this is that every developer who's out there does this, and they kind of have to do it their own way. So rather than have everybody reinvent the wheel, I'm happy to share that eBay has built a taxonomy metadata SDK that will do this for you exactly and succinctly. We've open sourced this. It's available on GitHub as shown here in the link, and it will very succinctly tell you any changes made anywhere in the category tree, any of the aspects of the category, any features within a category as well. We hope developers will love this and enjoy the benefits of it. Now, earlier today, you've heard Michael spend quite a bit of time showing the experience improvements we've made to our own selling tools to help sellers improve the amount of aspects they bring up on their listings. I've spent some time showing you how you can do that with our APIs. And I would be remiss if I did all of this and let Michael do all of this too, where we didn't explain to you the benefits of it. We know these are very real benefits. There is a direct lever in sales growth between the number of aspects a seller adopts and the amount of sales that they get. We know this because we've done internal A/B experimentation around this. And to give you an example of just how impactful this is, an example of our home and garden category for UK, with the experience improvements we made to our own listing tools for helping sellers know as they're creating listings, what they can do better, when they're looking at their existing listings, which ones need the most attention, and also when they revise their listings, similar practices. We have found that we've been able to perform or help sellers produce an 18% increase in aspect adoption. That means they're putting 18% more recommended aspects on listings, not the required ones, but the ones that are recommended. So we've helped sellers understand the value and they've taken action against that. And while I can't discuss the exact number, I can tell you it's driven a meaningful increase in conversion and sell-through. In my 15 years at eBay, I've yet to see a single feature drive 20% change in any one thing. So this has been really exciting and remarkable to see. So you've seen what we've done in our tools, and with the API changes I've shared with you, you can make those similar improvements to your experiences or in your behind-the-scenes workflows to get the similar benefits for the sellers you support. That's our view of why this is compelling, why I'm excited about it, and why I've spent the time sharing with you how you can do it too. But as important and hopefully impactful and heartfelt our words are around this, it's really important sometimes to share with you what developers or sellers themselves have found. And I'd love to spend just about a minute and a half here with a developer in our community who's made changes to increase aspects adoption to achieve what they claim and shared with us, and we've verified, is a 9 times increase in their sales volume due specifically to aspects adoptions being increased. So let me play that video for you now, and I'll be back with you in just about a minute.
My name is Elliot Bennett. I work for Toolstation, and I've helped lead the project and the integration between eBay and Toolstation. Toolstation sells a variety of items predominantly to the trade, including power tools, hand tools, and bathroom products. From the beginning of our launch on eBay, we didn't have any item specifics, but once we added these, our sales increased 9 times. We look to add as many item specifics as we can, mirroring our own website for the breadth of information we already provide. We look to start with the most important specifics per category, but our end goal is to be as extensive as we possibly can. We learned very quickly to take eBay seriously. I would recommend that you use eBay's language, really embrace the platform and engage with the category managers. We sell thousands of products across hundreds of categories, so item specifics can vary, which is why we try to focus on key information per product. What's worked particularly well for us in terms of optimization is mirroring our own website. The incrementality of adding item specifics was huge for Toolstation. They've definitely contributed to our continued growth, which we believe has only just begun.
Get more tips and guidance from the eBay team by subscribing to our channel on YouTube and click the bell icon to enable notifications. YouTube will let you know as soon as new videos are available.
Again, one of the things I love about working with eBay is the impact that we get to have with our sellers, our community. And it's when we see things like that, we know that we've got something really right, and we're hoping you can adopt our APIs to have the same impact for your sellers. Everything I've talked about here today and that Michael shared is available in our API documentation, so you can get a deeper look into how you're able to produce these same results in your applications for sellers. So thank you for that. It's been exciting to tell you about what we've done for Aspects, what we're excited to see the impact of, and hope you can do the same. Next up, I'd like to help you understand another new feature that we rolled out last year, but then more recently released the API to support the same functionality. And it's a great way to boost sales for sellers with something we call offers to buyers. So offers to buyers is a neat set of functionality that lets sellers send a private targeted offer to buyers who have expressed interest in the listings that they have live. So buyers can express interest both actively and passively through watching a listing, through putting it in their cart, their repeated shown interest in listing. But we detect that, and we will discover that certain items then have buyers who are eligible to receive an offer from a seller, and sellers can send that private target offer to those buyers. It's a great way to kind of bring buyers over the fence. They're hanging on there at the last minute, not sure if they're going to make that purchase, but it's also a fantastic way to do price discovery or inventory without giving away that you're actually doing that. So, as I mentioned before, we released this in our web tools in 2019, iterated on it until we got it right, and then released the API after eBay Connect last year in October of 2019. In the first 14 months this has been live, the growth has been staggering. Where in Q1, we are now at a point we've surpassed more than 1.5 million offers a day. This is a monumental impact for sellers. We've heard so much about it from positive in our community, and I'm excited to be able to bring it to an API form. While I can't, again, disclose the absolute numbers on the left side of these graphs, I really wanted to take the opportunity to really visualize the trend of what we've seen both in terms of offers sent, and it continues to grow, in the equivalent GMV, which also continues to grow. And we've seen all of this without cannibalization to other sales. So before I go on any more about it from what it is, let me take you through how you can do it with an API. The first step is to find the listings that have interested buyers. So it's very simple to do that with this REST-related call. It will return back the listings where, for a given seller, so you pass in the seller ID, you get back all the listings that have eligible buyers. And then these are buyers that have either put it in their watch list, placed it in their cart, or done some other things that we know really express interest. And this logic continues to grow and expand, increasing eligibility for listings. So once the listings have been found, we make it super easy to send offers to those buyers. The simple step here is one invocation to the send offer to interested buyers API call will send an offer out to each of the interested buyers. And with that, you can include a personalized message, you can include the discount amount, you can offer a counteroffer status, whether you want to allow counteroffers, and then also set how long that offer is good for so the seller remains in control. Buyers receive app notifications and message from eBay across the site to know they've got an offer, and they can choose to accept, counter, or decline. So let me show you a demo of these real quick too. Over here to the negotiation API, the very first thing I'll do is I will say, I will act as if I am a seller here. And I will choose to find all the eligible items that I have where buyers are interested in basically purchasing an item, but haven't really made that commitment yet. So I can take this first one here, 95099 item ID, and see that I'm actually watching it over here as well. So I'm watching this as if I were a buyer. Now, from a seller perspective, I can take the same item ID and pass it into the API call here, and basically send an offer with a 10% discount, quantity 1. I'm not going to allow counter offers, and I'm going to set it good for 2 days. As I'm doing this too, I can also set a personalized message. And we've noticed a measurable difference in the number of offers that are accepted when personalized messages are included versus just being empty. So do take time to do that when you use this feature. But let me send this offer off. And you can see in the response, I get back that I was able to send an offer out to 2 interested watchers. So there were 2 buyers interested in this item, and they each got an offer for this. Now, as I mentioned before, in this view here, I'm acting as if I'm the buyer. So let me go into my eBay messages and check to see if there is an offer there for me, waiting for me. Yep, here it is. So we actually see, just like that, using your APIs, you can find listings that have offers, buyers that are interested in the item, and you can send them private offers that nobody else sees. A great new feature there. All right, so that's offers to buyers, something we're excited about. And again, we've had a tremendous amount of growth in it. We know you can too. This one here is a brand new API we released. We call this the Selling Feed API. We have feed APIs today, like LMS or bulk data exchange, and those have been around for a long while, and they will be around for a while longer, but this new API will be ultimately what replaces them. It is a rich, more robust, feed-based API that for the first time allows you to have programmatic feed management. That means that using REST-based APIs, you can request an asynchronous job to be started, define the criteria for it, check on the status of that, and pull down results files. Or in some cases where you need to do rich input, like being able to basically do order fulfillment for many orders, you can also pass in an order feed. But as you would expect, there's a very clear workflow for how you define a job, check on the job status, and learn where you can download the results from. This is a brand new platform built from the ground up that has better performance and extensibility than we've had for our existing feed platforms like LMS and bulk data exchange. So we're excited to bring more and more features to this over time. To begin with, the cases that are already live or will be live at the end of this month. So live now are order reports and order fulfillment. At the end of this month, you'll also be able to use a feed to pull down in very fast aggregate form customer service metrics across many, many sellers. So we're excited about the Selling Feed API. The last thing I'll say is that your feedback always really matters. And we get input from you from all the time in all different directions. So we've made a number of improvements to our existing APIs based upon your feedback, and I'll just go through these quickly. First, with the Analytics API, as I just mentioned for the Feed API, we do it here for the REST version as well. You can pull back customer service metrics. This is really important for helping sellers know how well they're meeting the standards and expectations that buyers have of them, and where they're maybe at risk of maybe falling below standard, or really even going above standard. So if you haven't integrated with the Analytics API, you should do so now for other reasons, but you can also pick up the new customer service metrics that are available. And this is live now. Next up, with our Marketing API, which gets a lot of use for sending out promotions and promoted listings to buyers, for sellers. We've expanded support for all of our France, Italy, and Spain sites, and Canada. This is live and available now. And because of the success we've had around this and the adoption, we've increased the maximum number of campaign items to 50,000 items per campaign now. This will reduce the number of campaigns you have to create and number of invocations you have to make. This is a big improvement as well. Last up, our sellers, many sellers and developers have migrated over to our Inventory API to create and manage their listings and inventory on eBay. We've had a few feature gaps there in the past, and we're closing those up swiftly. As of now, I can tell you that live, we've closed up the gap, and charity donation is now available inside of the Inventory API. So eBay Giving Works, eBay Charity is such a big part of what we do. To date, we've given more than $1 billion to charity, and now that developers use the Inventory API can take part in that as well. What we're working on now, and will be available by early Q1, is finally support for auctions, secondary category, scheduled listings, and being able to actually specify available inventory across multiple warehouses. This here will not only close the remaining differences between the trading API and the inventory API, but we will have exceeded what's available in the trading API by supporting multi-warehouse support for availability. So a lot of exciting changes here for existing APIs, and every one of these has come from your feedback, and we thank you for that. Keep sending it to us. It makes a difference. So with that, that is the end of the presentation. I want to thank you for your time. It's been great to spend this time with you going through all of these and showing you some of the demos, and look forward to seeing you again next year, maybe in person. But again, thank you for your time today. At this point, I'd love to invite Michael and Tanya back up, and we'll get into some rich Q&A based on questions you've asked us as well. So thank you, and come on back, Michael and Tanya.